Oh, we just never saw it. Oh, Clovis chiseling his way. Dickerson bound is saved by Bodo. Bodo. See, right now it is effectively turned into a road game for Michigan. The whole history is against them.
Time or take the lead. They got a mismatch either way. Clayton.
Yo, Amateur Lore here, and y'all already know what's up. We're covering the first 2 rounds of March Madness. This is heavily inspired by Urinating Tree. I like his sports ball videos, so yeah, shout out to Tree. And F it, all of Clickbait Sports, shout out to them too. This video took extremely long to make. I was coming home after my 10-hour shift at the ball busting factory, hopping right onto my laptop for some more work. So if you want me to continue and do the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 rounds, a like and a sub would let me know to continue. If I get enough, then I'll do it. The commentary for this video is super chill. I was off the za. Don't take me too serious. And oh yeah, comment your hot takes for the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. I plan on doing another hot take video. But yeah, let's jump right into March Madness Part 1.
Round 1, fight!
How many of y'all picked Montana to win this game? Don't be shy, comment down below. Early on, this game had a nice flow to it, and even though the Badgers looked clearly like the better team from pretty much the 22 jump streak, shout out to them Grizzlies though. Montana was keeping up with them for majority of the first half. I know Wisconsin would go up by like 8 or something going into halftime, but they had plenty of chances to extend that lead to double digits. But every time they would try to, Montana would just do enough to keep themselves in the game. In the second half, things would start to pick up for Montana as they would start to string along some stops and chip away at the Wisconsin Badgers lead, cutting their deficit down to 4 as the score was 51-47. But from there, the rest of the game for Montana would be like a Diddy party, because Wisconsin was having their way with the Grizzlies inside the paint as much as they wanted, shooting 55% from the field and out-rebounding the Grizzlies by 11 boards, winning pretty comfortably 85-66. Shout out to Badger Nation, congrats on making it to the next round. How would the Zach Edey list Boilermakers perform in March this year, after going on one of their best runs in program history? Well, early on, it was pretty hard to tell. I don't think High Point took any shots inside the paint during the first 10 minutes of this game, as they would just drive and kick, and early on it was working pretty well, as they were knocking down a good amount of their shots from beyond the arc and keeping the game within reach. And on the flip side, even without Sneako Edey, the Boilermakers were still being bullies inside the paint, which was therapeutic for me because I hate change, and so does Matt Painter. It looked like towards the end of the first half, Purdue was starting to put things together and pull away from High Point, but to the Panthers' credit, they would come back out in the second half and double down on not shooting any layups, knocking down thoink after thoink, cutting the lead down to 59-56 with under 7 minutes left on the clock. But who would have guessed though that Purdue's size and length would wear down High Point, eventually leading to their hot shooting to cool down a little bit, while the Boilermakers would just continue to dominate the point, scoring easy basket after easy basket, winning the game pretty comfortably in the end, 75-63. As a kid, I really liked trains, especially the movie I Love Toy Trains. So congrats Purdue and good luck in the next round. The Freemasons versus the Oil Tycoons, a battle of brains versus large pockets. I wonder who would win this matchup. The Aggies actually came out looking pretty impressive, making solid plays, playing some good defense, and taking the biscuit to the rack at will. But something I always have to tell my grandma when we're watching basketball is that basketball is a game of runs, and Yale would start to go on their own little run towards the end of the half, cutting the lead down to about 6, with less than a minute on the clock. And me being a degenerate fell for the hype and threw some guap on Yale. And right after I pressed confirm on Hard Rock, the Aggies would close the quarter out on a run of their own, going up by 11 going into halftime. You cannot make this shit up, I swear. And I also can't make up the fact that even after seeing the Aggies go on a run, I still doubled down on the Freemasons. I'm not mad though, you get what you deserve. Anyway, in the second half, Yale looked a little bit more competitive. I don't know if it was their coach or the fact that I lit a sage and was holding on to my gems I got from the mall, doing the most for my latest hit. But they were making the game somewhat competitive, not allowing the Aggies to extend their lead to something crazy, being down by about 6 with less than 7 minutes in the game. But every time it looked like the Freemasons were closing in, the Aggies would respond in a big way, and would eventually close out the game winning 80-71. Texas A&M looks scary. I really don't want to play them. And their matchup versus the Blue and Maize is going to be some good cinema. Bring your Benjamin and popcorn. Congratulations, Aggie Nation. Good luck, and I know y'all got some leftover oil. Let Amateur Lore hold some. Man, where was Clemson early on in this game? For a team who has played extremely well this season, the Tigers just came out flat in this game, as McNeese would absolutely dominate the first half of this ball game. It literally took Clemson till about with less than 4 minutes in the first half to hit a 3-point shot. I think they missed their first like 7 to 8 3-point attempts, which is never good. And on the flip side, Brandon Murray and McNeese came off the bench and started emoting all over the Tigers on the offensive side of the ball, dropping 14 points in the first half, helping give McNeese the edge in the first half, going into halftime up by 18 on the Clemson Tigers. I have to give credit to Clemson though, because they could have very well just rolled over and died, but they fought back, and even though it took a while for the 3-point shot to start falling in the second half, I believe they only hit their second 3 of the game up to that point with about 11 minutes left in the game, which is crazy, but I guess if you live and die by the tray ball, things like this are bound to happen. But like I said, Clemson kept fighting back, bringing the lead down to single digits with less than 2 minutes left in the game. They had a chance late but needed a miracle, and unfortunately for Clemson, USA Hockey already used up their miracle, as McNeese would close out the game, taking down the 5th seeded Clemson Tigers 69-67. Congrats, Cowboy Nation. Are y'all this year's Cinderella? Definitely going to be having my eye on you for the rest of the tourney. This game was back and forth for majority of the first half, as every time either school would make a big shot, the other would return the favor. And the game would pretty much play out like this for the first 15 minutes, until with about 4 minutes left, BYU would go on a huge run to end the half, giving the Cougars an 11-point lead going into halftime. Whatever chance the VCU Rams had at making a comeback attempt in the second half would go out the window, as every time the Rams would strike or try to attempt to start a run to bring them back within striking distance, the BYU Cougars would always have a response, mainly from their stud guard Richie Saunders, who dropped majority of his points in the second half. And even though he performed not so good from beyond the three-point line, he didn't let that affect him as he got to the paint and scored in other ways. I say all this to say the Cougars were handing the Rams belt to ass for most of the second half, as I think the closest the Rams would get before the obvious 9-point deficit to end the game was about like 12, and it took the Rams till about less than 4 minutes in the game to get to that point. At that time the game was pretty much over, as the Cougars would pull off the impressive win 80-71. Congrats University of Moral Oral on making it to the next round. No cap, who else was shocked by how strong the Razorbacks came out this game? You know, I've had my beef with Coach Calipari for a little minute, but damn, bro coached a hell of a game, somewhat. Early on, it was pretty easy to tell that this was going to be the best game on the first day of the men's basketball college tournament, as neither team in the first half would assert their dominance, going back and forth like a toxic couple arguing. And just like a toxic couple arguing, it was entertaining to watch. It seemed like to close out the first half, the Hogs were starting to take control of the game as they would go into halftime up 49-47. And in the early parts of the second half, the Hogs would take about a 10-point lead, putting the Kansas Jayhawks on their back foot, until the Jayhawks would make a little adjustment on the defensive end, switching to a zone. And for a while it worked extremely well, as Kansas was able to claw their way back, finally taking the lead and extending it to 3 with 3 minutes left on the clock. But this is the part of the video where I give Coach Calipari and this Razorback squad major props, because I thought once the Jayhawks took the lead, it was over for the Hogs. But they locked in as Janelle Davis would hit pretty much the game-winning 3, as from there the Razorbacks would hit their free throws and secure the win over Kansas 79-72. Man, shout out to Hog Nation. This team is battle-tested and looks scary. Good luck in the next round. March has just started, and I need you to be honest. How many of y'all brackets have been busted already? Drake just straight up outplayed Missouri on both sides of the ball for majority of the game. It took till about with around 4 minutes left in the second half for the Tigers to actually make this game somewhat competitive. I actually really expected a lot out of this Missouri Tigers squad. They were pretty decent during SEC play, but this is why we laced them up, because in March it doesn't matter what conference you play in, all that matters is what you do on the hardwood. And on the wood, Drake would just play better basketball. And taking a look at the game splits, you'll notice the Bulldogs won majority of the battles, shooting 54% from the field and 50% from 3, compared to Missouri's 33% from the field and 25% from 3. But I think the stat that shocked me the most was the fact that Drake out-rebounded Missouri. That just shouldn't happen, but it did, and as a result, Drake is moving on to the next round. I know Kendrick Lamar is pissed about this. Congratulations, Drake. You might be the Cinderella of March. I know Red Raiders fans had to be shitting bricks early on in this matchup. Well, actually for majority of this matchup, as the Seahawks actually came out during the last game of the night and put on a respectable performance. The Red Raiders would go on a couple of runs in the first half, looking like they might blow UNC Wilmington out of the water. But the Seahawks would keep fighting, actually having the score at 38-34 going into halftime. And once the second half would start, things would pick up as the Seahawks would start to go on a run, actually taking the lead against Texas Tech 48-47 around the 14-minute mark. At this point, I was like, oh shit, I think we have another Cinderella on our hands. But eventually Texas Tech would just wear down the less deeper UNC Wilmington squad. And it would take a lot longer than I think most expected, but inevitably, it would happen as Texas Tech would win 82-72. Congrats Texas Tech on moving on to the next round. This game was weird and definitely anxiety-inducing if you're a Michigan fan. But looking through some of the chatter that was going on around this game, I guess apparently this is nothing new for Wolverines basketball this year. Anyway, Big Blue came out looking pretty good minus all the turnovers, and I thought they might run away with this game if they could just take care of the damn ball, but Michigan was playing with fire all game. And I have to give major credit to the UC San Diego team, because in their first year being eligible to make the men's basketball tournament, they came in and gave it their all, leaving everything on the floor. They were down by like 10 plus going into halftime, but would come out of the half going on a huge run, bringing the deficit to within 3. And from there, both teams would duke it out, giving us some primetime late night entertainment. Michigan would try their best to extend their lead and put the game away, but the Trojans would have a response every time, making some extremely tough baskets and finally taking the lead 65-63 with under 3 minutes left. But just when San Diego would strike and the Wolverines would need a big clutch basket, someone who isn't new to making big time baskets, Trey Donaldson, would nail a huge 3-point shot, giving Michigan the lead, and from there they would close it out, locking down San Diego to secure the win 68-65. This was a nail-biter, Michigan, but you survived. Good luck.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Yo, what's good? Don't worry, this isn't a sponsor. This is just a part of the video where I'm fast-forwarding through some of the games, more specifically the matchups I felt were blowouts. If I covered every single game in the way I'm doing for this video, I think the length would be like over an hour. So yeah, here are some of the more lopsided wins from round 1. Going to leave this up on the screen for like a couple more seconds. If you made it this far, make sure you like and sub, all that good shit. Alright, let's jump back into round 1. I wonder how Roll Tide Willie is doing. I know this game versus Robert Morris must have been not very easy to watch for him. Man, this Bama squad can score with the best of them, but that fucking defense is such a liability. And throughout majority of this match, it was on full display for the world to see. I mean, I'll say this once again, this Bama team has an elite offense. They were scoring at will in this Robert Morris squad. I'm talking on all 3 levels, which is extremely impressive. The only problem was Robert Morris was doing the exact same thing to the Tide on offense. This game was 40-36 going into halftime. Robert Morris is a good basketball school, and y'all let me know if I'm tripping, but there's no reason a team that was competing for a #1 seed all year should be in a barn burner with the 15th seed. That's just me though. Also, shout out to Amarion Dickerson. Never heard of him before this game, but homie was balling this game. PTP for sure. There was even a point in this game, I believe almost halfway through the second half, where Dickerson would, excuse my language, but put his dick all over the Bama defender, as he would have a ferocious putback dunk, sending the crowd into a frenzy. Robert Morris might have won this game if it wasn't for their lack of size, as late it was really apparent Alabama's size and length was really wearing Robert Morris down. But even saying all of that, it was still only a 2-point game around the 8-minute mark. And surprisingly, Robert Morris would take the lead going up 65-64. But that lead wouldn't last for long, as Bama would remember they play in the SEC and spent hundreds of thousands on this squad, putting the game away, winning 90-81. Bama, a win is a win. Congrats on making it to the next round, but we all know what you need to do. Boy, the Rams might be the hottest team coming into March besides my Florida Gators. Of course y'all know I had to throw that in. Real shit, I'm really impressed with this Colorado State guard play. To go far in March, a big requirement for me is to have a pair of ball handlers that can get their own shot and just make shit happen. And the Rams check off that box. Memphis on the flip side checks off the box inside the paint, and their big men are absolute dogs. And we're getting whatever they wanted inside the paint like a spoiled child against the Rams. This game had a beautiful flow to it in the first half, as neither team could really pull away early, as both teams were just exchanging buckets. Memphis was flying in this game, and a lot of their athleticism was on full display, and that would carry them to the biggest lead in the game, which was 7. But the Rams had the equalizer for all the athleticism, which was just good solid guard play. And it wouldn't take long for the Rams to take the lead back, and once they did, they would try their best to hold on and secure the game. And Casey Evans for Colorado State, who would have a career night, would make sure of it, as Colorado State would win the game 78-70. Yet another upset in March. This Rams squad looks really good. Congrats Colorado State, good luck in the next round. The Tar Heels were one of the most scary teams to play coming into the first round after their absolute destruction of San Diego State. I wholeheartedly believe that this North Carolina squad, after their huge win over the Aztecs, were maybe Final Four bound. Maybe. Yeah, Ole Miss said amateur law, shut the fuck up bro and watch us cook, G. And yeah, Ole Miss cooked. They looked like the better team from pretty much the jump. They were running a lot of off-ball action, getting open shots, and most importantly, knocking them down. They were like 40% from beyond Noah's Ark. When you're shooting like that from the deep state, it's not a shock to anyone Ole Miss was up by like 18 going into halftime. I know Marshall Henderson had to be proud. Shout out Land Sharks. The Tar Heels would really try their best to come back and make this game somewhat interesting, and to their credit, they would somewhat do that, as North Carolina were going on an 11-0 run, cutting the deficit to about 4. They really had a shot late to make the comeback and possibly win the game, but Sean Pudella, I probably pronounced his name wrong, of Ole Miss would nail an ice cold 3, sealing the game. Congrats Ole Miss. Good luck in the next round. Easily one of the better games of day 2. Both these teams were scoring at will to begin this match, which was a nice surprise because a lot of these round 1 games I watched had some pretty terrible shooting. This game, on the other hand, I don't think either team missed a shot in the first half. The NCAA must have turned up the game sliders. But yeah, the first half of this basketball game was peak fiction, and the second half would be much of the same. Although early into the second half, Baylor seemed to take control of the ball game, as they were driving to the cup and getting penetration on the Bulldogs pretty much anytime they wanted, extending the lead to as much as 10 at one point. However, Mississippi State would mount a late comeback, bringing themselves back into the game, only being down 1. But the young freshman VJ Edgecombe would show the world why he's a future NBA lottery pick, putting his head down and driving straight to Rack City, running every red light, making what would be pretty much the game-winning shot, giving Baylor the 75-72 win. Congrats Bears, good luck in the next round. Xavier versus Illinois was a toss-up early. While watching this matchup, I was waiting for one team to take control of this game and assert their dominance, but that wouldn't happen. Both squads would exchange buckets like stalks, and it was pretty entertaining to watch. One of the more sneaky games on the day 2 slate. One of the stories starting to arise during this ballgame was Will Riley's slow start to the ballgame, missing his first 3 shot attempts. That wouldn't last long though, as he would finish the game going for 22 points, shooting 8 for 12 from the field. The first half of this game had a nice flow, with both teams raining down 3s. Illinois would shoot just a little bit better, nailing a 3 to end the half, sending the Fighting Illini into halftime up 5 against the Musketeers. Illinois would carry the momentum from the end of the first half into the second, extending their lead to double digits, dominating the Musketeers in Act 2 of this game, securing a pretty comfortable win, 86-73. Major props to this Fighting Illini squad, they definitely look scary. Good luck in the next round, and y'all let me know in the comments, has the Big 12 been the best conference so far in March Madness? Chat, is the SEC cooked? I had no idea so many people really didn't like the SEC. What did the Southeastern Conference do to be hated so much? I don't know. Anyway, damn it Vanderbilt, I really had faith in you, and for good reason. As early on in this game, would it be a stretch for me to say the Commodores looked a little better? They were playing good defense and were scoring points off turnovers, going up by as much as 11 in the first half. Although St. Mary's would close the half out on a little 6-2 run of their own, cutting the Commodores lead from 11-9. Opening the second half up, Vandy was starting to take control of the basketball game, with their lead on St. Mary's teetering between 10 and 7 points. They had so many opportunities to put the game away, but instead Vanderbilt would allow St. Mary's to stay in the game and chip away, which would lead to the Gales eventually taking the lead in the ball game for the first time in a while around the 6-minute mark off of a huge three. And this is just basic science. The basketball is energy, and whichever team is giving off higher energy, then good things are just bound to happen. And that's exactly what would happen. As once St. Mary's would take the lead and control of this game, they wouldn't look back, winning 59-56. I know I doubted y'all in my hot take video, and now I look stupid. Well-deserved win, St. Mary's. Good luck in the next round. You know, they haven't had the best regular season, but let's not forget the UConn Huskies are the defending national champs. And it seems like in this tourney, this team is playing like the underdogs, which is extremely scary. OU fans, y'all let me know down below in the comments. But if Fears doesn't have the ball in his hands, does the Sooners have anyone else who can get them a bucket? Oh yeah, and something that caught my eye was how many times the Sooner squad would pass up open looks, honestly, for worse looks. I was baffled at some of the shots OU passed up. And the craziest part to me is even with this subpar performance from the Sooners, they were still in this ballgame, only being down by 6 going into halftime. UConn would just be too much for the Sooners in the second half, as the Huskies were spreading the ball around, getting majority of their players involved in the game with easy buckets off half-court sets. While on the OU side of things, Jeremiah Fears was really putting the team on his back, trying his hardest to keep his squad in the ballgame. And for a while, that strategy for the Sooners was working, but eventually the UConn defense was starting to stiffen up, making each basket more and more difficult for OU, resulting in the Huskies securing the 67-59 win. UConn is definitely a team who can make some noise in the tourney. I would say good luck, but for obvious reasons I can't. New Mexico came out flying early in this game. Shout out to Donovan Dent. I wasn't familiar with Brody's game and honestly disappointed in myself because I caught a couple of New Mexico games this year. I must have just not been locked in enough. Who cares though, because Donovan Dent was locked the fuck in, helping the Lobos jump out to a 7-point lead halfway through the first. After a while though, Marquette would start to settle down and climb their way back into the ball game, going into halftime only down 35-32. David Joplin for the Golden Eagles didn't want to go back home. Dude came out in the second half giving New Mexico buckets. And after being down for the majority of the game, Marquette would finally take the lead, going up 47-46. And at this point, I was almost for sure the game was starting to tip in the Golden Eagles' favor. But every time Marquette would look like they were about to extend their slim lead, New Mexico would come back. And when the game clock got to under 5 minutes, Donovan Harvey Dent would enter the twilight zone, making plays for the Lobos each time they came down the court, finishing off the Marquette Golden Eagles 75-66. The Mountain West Conference is looking tough this March. The Lobos are a problem. Watch out, Sparty. Let's get these blowouts for round 2 out of the way early. Gonna leave it up for like 10 seconds, so get a good look before we hop into the games. Alright, bet we're in.
Round 2. Fight.
How would the first game of round 2 play out? Well, I know early on a lot of the SEC haters were happy, texting back and forth in their little group chat like, I told you guys, this Auburn squad is so overrated. Alright, you caught me. I was just projecting. I was the haters. Back to Creighton versus Auburn. Shout out to the Blue Jays because I think they played and performed a lot better than a lot of people thought they would. As in the first half, they were giving the Auburn Tigers everything they had, moving without the ball for easy cuts to the basket and hustling and fighting for extra shot opportunities and knocking down their open looks as the Blue Jays would be up going into halftime 37-35. And you know me, Amateur Lore's low-key boss man Jack, as I'd add the Creighton win to my 18-leg $160,000 parlay. But before my legs could even start to walk, Auburn would remind the world why they were the #1 overall seed coming into this tournament. Creighton would hang around in the second half for a while, keeping the game close, going band for band with the Tigers, but no matter how hard you try to fight it, you can't change nature. As it's just a simple fact, the War Eagle is way higher up than the Blue Jays on the food chain. Auburn's talent size and playmaking ability would all shine in the final minutes of this game, as the Tigers would secure the win 82-70, sending the Tigers to the Sweet 16. Good luck, Auburn. I'm expecting a lot out of you this March. Yo, BYU is legit. There is nothing scarier to me than a group of YNs who have all been on missions before. And almost every single dude on this Cougar squad has slid on a mission. And not only are they experienced in the field, they can also shoot. And after that last game where they shot 35% from the 3, I heard Ryan Saunders saying, I understand it now. And yeah, they shot 40% from the 3 this game. The hot shooting started right away for BYU. As the entire first half was all Cougars, it seemed like every time Wisconsin would make a bucket, BYU would make 3. I don't know how that makes any sense, but if you watch this game, you get what I'm saying. It felt like for majority of this game, Wisconsin was climbing an uphill battle. I swear everything the Cougars were putting up was going in. And even with everything going in BYU's favor, Wisconsin would stay just within striking distance, in large part due to their stud guard, John Tanji, who dropped 37 points, which would be an NCAA tourney record for Wisconsin. And thanks to his heroic performance, even though his team would be down for majority of the game, Wisconsin would still have a chance to tie or win the game, with the shot clock winding down. But his efforts would fall short as he would miss the game tying Jay, advancing the Cougars to the Sweet 16. BYU looks scary. Good luck in the Sweet 16. This game was extremely boring for the first 38 minutes. Houston came out playing Houston basketball, looking like their matchup versus the Bulldogs was going to be all business and just a slight hindrance in their road to the Final Four. Huge shout out to Graham Ike of Gonzaga. Birdie played a hell of a ball game, dropping 27 for the Zags, and on the Houston side, LJ Cryer, who would drop a 30 bomb and go a perfect 8 for 8 from the charity stripe. Alright, so let's fast forward to the final 2 minutes of this game because I was falling asleep watching this matchup, and things didn't get entertaining unless you're a Houston fan until the closing seconds. So yeah, I was like half asleep, and then my cat walked over me and her fluffy tail got in my face, and it woke me up, and I looked at the score and I was like, oh shit, the Zags are only down by 3 with a chance to tie the game on this last shot. So I'm all locked in again now, just for Gonzaga not to even get a shot off at the end of the game, losing. But I mean, that just shows you how good this Houston defense is, I guess. Congrats on making it back to the Sweet 16, but we all know what you're after. Good luck. Arkansas looks good. Really good. You know what they always say, sometimes in life all you need is a change of scenery. What if we were to get an Arkansas vs Kentucky Final Four matchup? That'd be dope. I don't even know if Calipari vs Pitino was some pretty entertaining ball, as both teams would come out early making big play after big play. The Razorbacks would have the early edge in this game, being on top for majority of the first half, and would close out the half with a buzzer beater, going into the locker room with all the momentum, as the score would be Arkansas 35, St. John's 32. St. John's would come out of the halftime unusually slow, as Arkansas would carry the momentum over from the first half into the second, opening up the half with a nice run to extend their lead to as much as 10. But we all knew the restaurant would mount a little run of their own, and like clockwork they would, bringing the deficit down to about 2, as the score would be with under 5 minutes left, Arkansas 64, St. John's 62. This Arkansas Razorback squad is a little different though, because one of Calipari's biggest flaws is making adjustments and closing out games. But today he quieted a lot of his doubters, as Arkansas would hold on to their lead, winning 75-66, advancing the Razorbacks to the Sweet 16. Congrats, this is a nice story to follow. Good luck versus Texas Tech. I think the big story of round 2 of the men's basketball tournament was the teams who we thought had a chance at being Cinderella stories getting their fairy tale cut short. Texas Tech had the very clear advantage over Drake inside the paint with their size, and they would lean on that all game long. Something that really impressed me after tuning into this ballgame was the fact that the Red Raiders only shot like 14% from 3 compared to Drake's 47%. But let's be real, the Red Raiders really didn't need the 3-ball to win this game, as they were getting whatever they wanted inside the paint at will. Major props no player to this Drake squad, because even with the size disparity, they managed to somewhat keep this game close. As early into the second half, Drake would be only down 37-34 and were in striking distance. I thought Drake really had a chance at making this game interesting, and for a hot little minute in the second, Drake was holding their own, getting close to tying or retaking the lead. But every time the Bulldogs would throw a punch, the Red Raiders would respond with their own punch, pulling away late to win the ball game 77-64. Congrats Texas Tech, good luck in the Sweet 16. I had a feeling this game would be pretty high scoring, and that's exactly how it would start out. Michigan was shooting lights out early, and so were the Aggies. I was going back and forth between which team I thought looked more impressive in the first half, and it was really close, but I gave the slight advantage to the Aggies, as they were just knocking down their open looks a little more consistently going into halftime, up 39-35 on the Michigan Wolverines. And in the second half, Texas A&M was gearing up to put the game away, trying their hardest to extend their lead to double digits, but the Michigan Wolverines would always have a response. And although it would take a hot minute, thanks to their star Roddy Gale, he would take over late in the second half, at one point scoring 10 straight points for the Wolverines, as they would finally take the lead. And once they did, they wouldn't look back, finishing off the game extremely strong, taking down the Aggies 91-79. Congrats Big Blue, good luck in the Sweet 16. Dudes, what the fucking shitballs. This game was extremely anxiety-inducing for Gator fans. Real shit, watching this game felt like I was outside in the freezing cold weather, naked with a bow and arrow pointed at my chest. UConn was beating Florida at their own game for majority of this matchup. I can't tell you how many times the Huskies would out-hustle Florida early on, outworking them for extra possessions. I'd say for about like 75% of this game, the Huskies legit looked like they were about to pull off the upset. But credit to Florida, they would hold on and overcome the adversity. Which, I mean, I guess is good to get the tough game and tough wins out of the way early in the men's basketball tournament. I have to give a huge shout out to Walter Clayton Jr. Homie really put this Florida team on his back late, dropping 23 huge points, and we needed every single one of those 23 points to pull off the win. Props to the UConn Huskies though, because they came out here and gave this Florida squad everything they could handle. And I wouldn't expect anything less from the defending national champions. A win is a win, Florida, but if we shoot as bad as we did from the free throw line and turn the ball over as much as we did against UConn, we might be in trouble in the Sweet 16. Still, I'm so proud of this comeback win for Florida. Let's learn from this game and become better from it. New Mexico came out balling early in this game. They looked really good, moving the ball well, getting penetration and taking it to the rack for easy baskets, knocking down some tough looks from the deep end. The Lobos would have a 10-point lead 13 minutes into the game, being up 24-14 on the Spartans. But before you could grab another cold one from the fridge, Michigan State would close out the first half on a nice run, cutting their deficit down to 2 going into halftime. The second half would be back and forth, as both teams would swap buckets like swingers, as every time New Mexico would drop a bucket, gaining some momentum, Michigan State would always come back with a response of their own. And this would go on for a good majority of the second half, as things would really start to turn up. I think the turning point of this matchup would happen around the 4-minute mark, when Michigan State would knock down a huge 3, giving them a 9-point lead, and from there they would play solid defense and make their shots down the stretch to secure the win over New Mexico 71-63. Good tough win. Good luck in the Sweet 16, Sparty. Who would have guessed that before coming into this college basketball season, both Kentucky and Arkansas would both be advancing to the Sweet 16? I find it crazy that Kentucky and Arkansas both won from Calipari leaving Kentucky. Be real, who had that on their bingo board at the beginning of the year? Illinois versus Kentucky was a pretty chalk game to watch. No lie, Kentucky looked like the better squad from the start of the ball game until the finish. A large part of that had to do with Illinois turning the ball over a ton, and the Wildcats being lights out from Mobb Deep. There isn't really much to to speak up from this game in my opinion, because in the second half, Kentucky would come out and just dominate, extending their lead to double digits and holding on. Illinois would cut the lead down a couple of times and try their best to make this game interesting. However, the Wildcats would always have the ether for whenever the Fighting Illini would try to mount a comeback. The Kentucky Wildcats are looking insane right now, and their matchup versus Tennessee is going to be a slugfest. I really don't know where I'm leaning. I think either team could win and make the Final Four. Congrats Kentucky on advantage of the Sweet 16. Good luck. Maryland versus Colorado State was easily one of the more entertaining games in round 2 of the men's basketball tourney. I don't know if it was just me, but in this year's first 2 rounds, it seemed like the games were a little more chalk than usual. So it was a nice surprise. The Rams carried their momentum from their last game into this one and would come out strong against the Terps. Colorado State was knocking down some deep shots early as their guards were creating off the dribble, breaking the Maryland defenders down. And on the flip side, the Terps would start off mad slow. I think there was a point in the first half where Maryland would go like 7 straight minutes without making a field goal. Despite the slow start, the Terps would stay within the game, playing from behind for majority of the first and second half, until about with 13 minutes left, Selton Miguel of Maryland would knock down a huge 3, giving the Terps their first lead in a while as they would go up 55-54. And from there, both teams would duke it out, trading makes, setting up one of the best finishes of the men's basketball tournament so far. Down by 2 with 12 seconds left on the clock, Jalen Lake would knock down a huge 3 for Colorado State, giving them the lead with only 3 seconds left on the clock. When it seemed like the Rams had pretty much secured the win, Derek Queen of Maryland would respond, hitting a pretty ridiculous bank shot from an incredibly tough angle to secure the win at the buzzer 72-71. Huge prop to both teams. They both fought their hearts out, but there can only be one winner. I would say good luck in the Sweet 16, but you know why I can't. Last but not least, the final game of round 2 and one of the better ones, we got Oregon versus Arizona. I think the best way to explain this game was huge runs. The Oregon Ducks would start off the first on fire, knocking down more shots than they missed. And let me clarify something. They would be on fire for half of the first, because after the 10-minute mark, Oregon and Arizona would swap positions. As while the Wildcats couldn't buy a bucket and the Ducks couldn't miss early, the end of the first half would be the opposite, as Arizona couldn't miss and now Oregon was having a tough time scoring. The Ducks were up by double digits around the 10-minute mark of the first half, but going into the second half, Arizona would be leading 42-38. And the Wildcats would hold on to that lead for the rest of the second half, in large part to their star guard Caleb Love, having himself one hell of a night, dropping 29 points and coming in clutch whenever his team needed it. Towards the end of this game, things would really start to tighten up as both teams would start to heat up. After a couple of late turnovers from Arizona, Oregon would see themselves with a chance to tie the game, but couldn't get the job done as the opportunity was there, but the Wildcats would just hold on long enough to secure the win 87-83 and advance to the Sweet 16. Congrats Arizona, good luck in the Sweet 16.